Okay, this is the quick and dirty version of my final project for Kinesiology 4400 in the spring of 21 semester. I'm going to try to be really brief with this. So, the thing that I wanted to look at in statistics and measurements for our final project and to run through JASP is that of the concussions. So concussions have always been a really fascinating injury to me. I think that they have more implications on the personality than we have yet to even know, and we already have quite a bit of documentation based on it. So some sources that I quote, there's one study by Natalie Garden at the Queensland University of Technology. She quotes significant elevations on negativistic, depression, major depression, dyspnea, anxiety, dependent statistics, somatic, borderline scales of her inventory is called the Million Clinical Multi-Axial Inventory. So we know based on the literature that this is a thing that exists and that it can affect your personality, which makes a lot of sense. We've studied the areas of the brain for a while now. So I wanted to see how this would stack up in our class data set. So that's what we started with, was our class data set. It was all self-reported inventories. There's more information that gives you more detail, but the really quick version is that we did a concussion inventory and personality inventory. So we were given scores on each of those. And the scores that we were given for the personality inventory, those are listed elsewhere, but those are going to also be the variables for the t-test that we run later. So basically how we split this up is I got the concussion scores for each of the students in the class and summed them together. And based on that information, I created them into groups, and that group would then be my dependent variable for the t-test that I run. The independent variable in that would be those scores that correlate with the personality scores that we see. So went ahead and ran those t-tests, and I'll go ahead and link images in here, but we don't see a significant relationship, at least based on the information that we see, at least based on the information that we included. So with that in mind, I went in with a really strong bias, really trying to see a strong connection, at least in the short term t-test that we initially start with. So I went back and changed the categories. Instead of having it be multiple concussions and non-multiple concussions, I just split it between concussion havers and non-concussion havers, and I still did not see a significant relationship as you see on the other independent samples t-test. So it's fascinating to compare, to see how changing those the parameters of the test kind of changed how those relationships look, and you can see that on the scatter plots that are linked as well. So I want to do a brief discussion about the limiting factors of my study, because I think that's the most important part, like statistically to understand. The biggest one that I really want to start with, well, maybe I'll end with it actually, so we'll do the small ones first. So several small things that went into this is that both the concussion inventory and the personality inventory were self-assessed. So it wasn't that we had someone else doing a test for us. It wasn't even really that subjective of a test. It was kind of up to us to determine how it is, and we could have very easily forgotten how many concussions we actually have, or how many have even been diagnosed. We probably all had concussions as a kid. Well, not all of us, but several of us could have had concussions as a kid that just slip under the radar and we forget about. Let's see. Another thing that I think is really interesting, and probably the most interesting in terms of finding like a reliable versus valid test, or reliable or valid test for concussions, is in that inventory it discusses blacking out, which I know that they're not speaking specifically about alcohol abuse, but when I think about those two things next to each other, like brain damage and alcohol abuse, blacking out, those are all kind of associated for me. So when I took that inventory, I included the times that I had drank to excess in terms of, and it's not specifically ruled out in that questionnaire. One other thing that is kind of dumb on my part, but I omitted several different sample lines because several students didn't complete both the personality inventory and the concussion questionnaire. So after speaking with Sarah Harper, she told me that I could have just left it and that it would kind of contextualize the data and just include it for me. So things to note for the future, but I did not do it that way, so that's definitely noteworthy. And now for the biggest thing that I think limited my study was that I just didn't set it up correctly, and it's the question that I have is basically outside the scope of the data that we have. So my question is, how concussions change personality over time, right? But we only took one formative assessment, so we don't really even know. We don't know how in between how those scores will change. We just have a score, and then we've tried to associate it based on the number of concussions that we have, and we don't even see a relevant relationship with that. But again, like, the scope of what I'm asking is kind of outside of the information that we have. Overall, I really enjoyed this practice to be able to dive into JASP and to get some practice, get my feet wet on running some tests. I have a way more firm understanding of how all this stuff works, and I'm grateful for this knowledge, and hopefully it will help me in my career to be a better scientist and be a better clinician. Thank you for your time, for listening to me talk about my project today. And if you have any questions about this, I'm going to be uploading this to YouTube, so go ahead and drop them in the comments. I'll go ahead and link everything that's associated with the project there, including the full text of my final project, just so you can read through it on your own. But other than that, thank you so much for your time, and have a great day.